Good morning, or good afternoon on the East Coast. Jordan Sheridan live, Status Coup. Hope everybody's having a good day. Live a little bit earlier today, as I won't be live at the normal time later today. Smash that like button, share this live stream. I'm going to wait for more folks to trickle in. So during that time, I will talk to the people in the chat. There's a lot of news related to Trump, January 6th, Mar-a-Lago. Honestly, it's kind of hard to keep up because there's so many different investigations going on into Donald Trump, his administration. And I think it's relevant because we are going to have additional hearings on Wednesday of this week of the January 6th committee. So I'm going to wait for more folks to trickle in, but there is news related to Trump and the classified documents that he declassified in his mind. There is news pertaining to the January 6th investigation into Trump and his White House. Yeah, it's just a lot of news. So we'll get to all of it. Please smash that like button. Share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. Yvonne, would you still support Bernie in another run? It depends. It depends what the circumstances were. If he was primarying Biden, if Biden's not running again, and he is, it's Kamala Harris or somebody else. What other progressives choose to run. So it really depends. It also depends on what type of campaign Bernie would wage. If it's another campaign where he brings a spoon to a political knife fight, no, I probably would not support that. If he's not going to go all the way in going after his opponents, including Biden. So there's my answer on that. Although feckless and not politically willful enough, Bernie still has his faculties. Yes, against Biden, one-on-one, Biden, if you've seen some video in recent days, it hasn't been good. It hasn't been good. Anyway, smash that like button, share this live stream. As I said, there is pretty explosive, I would say, revelations that came out of a 60 Minutes interview yesterday with a investigator or former investigator on the January 6th committee. Revealed quite a lot that has not been out there. I haven't really covered the in-depth the January 6th committee because it's being covered ad nauseum. But I think what this investigator revealed is very, very relevant and potentially has legs in terms of an actual criminal referral, meaning the January 6th committee making a criminal referral to the Justice Department as related to Donald Trump. There's also more, I believe, evidence that ties Trump specifically to lying about the classified documents in Mar-a-Lago and actually provides motive, meaning it wasn't just, he didn't know what he was doing in terms of hiding the documents, giving false statements to the FBI. He was deliberately withholding them. More evidence into that. So we're going to get into all of it in a few minutes. I'm just going to wait a couple minutes till we get more people because I don't think people were expecting us to be live so early. So I'll give it a couple minutes while I'm doing that. Let me check something. Is the text delayed again, Colin? Seems like it. Have a countdown before? Yeah, we've been kind of experimenting with having a countdown and not having a countdown because people actually complain once the live stream is up about the countdown being there. So we've been kind of experimenting, having it, not having it. Jordan, I sincerely don't want this to sound alarmist, but what odds do you give that there's an actual civil war coming? It's a good question. We'll get into that later. All right. I think we got enough people to start here. Smash that like button once again. We got almost 100 people watching. Only 39 of you have pressed the like button. So please smash that like button. All right. So let's start. Let's start because there's multiple things going on here. You have the obviously the classified documents investigation that the Department of Justice is doing into Donald Trump. You have the January 6th committee investigation, and it seems you have the civil action that's being taken against Trump in New York by the Attorney General of New York. Potentially, there is a corresponding criminal. There is a criminal investigation going into that. So there's a lot of different things going on. Why I think it's relevant is Donald Trump, by all reports, is getting a little restless. He's definitely worried, particularly about the classified document investigation. And it might, again, speculative, lead to him speeding up his announcement to run for president again. All of this is also relevant because on Wednesday is probably the last hearing of the January 6th committee before the midterms, where they might be revealing more of what we're about to talk about. So important to get into it all. I want to start. Maggie Haberman, she is with the New York Times. She has been what many people call the Trump whisperer of many years. I would call her an access journalist who has pretty much done public relations for Trump and the Trump White House. Occasionally went hard on Trump, but occasionally went hard on Trump. But she's writing a book, and as has been a pattern here with folks who write Trump books, it seems like they had pretty important information a year before publishing the books that would have been important to know at the time they learned it, that they withheld for their book. I don't know. I'm writing a book now on the Flint water crisis and cover up a lot of what's in the book I've never reported or published, but not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't get media to publish it, because media doesn't care about the Flint water crisis or cover up. But I'm pretty sure Maggie Haberman could have published quite a lot of the things that she kept for her book. But I digress. This is from The Atlantic. It's a pretty long story that has kind of excerpts from Maggie Haberman's book, but I want to zero in on this particular part. Colin, if we could bring up that Maggie Haberman story from The Atlantic. It is, where is it on the doc? Right at the top of the doc. Can you go to the part that it starts with, I was curious when Trump? All right. And smash that like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. Really appreciate it. You can full screen it. I was curious, this is Maggie Haberman. I was curious when Trump said he had kept in touch with other world leaders since leaving office. I asked whether that included Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping, and he said no. But when I mentioned North Korea's Kim Jong-un, he responded, well, I don't want to say exactly, but before trailing off. I learned after the interview that he had been telling people at Mar-a-Lago that he was still in contact with North Korea's supreme leader, whose picture with Trump hung on the wall of his new office at his club. Okay. He demurred when I asked him if he had taken any documents of note upon departing the White House. Quote, nothing of great urgency, no, he said, before mentioning the letters that Kim Jong-un had sent him, which he had showed off to so many Oval Office visitors that advisors were concerned he was being careless with sensitive material. Quote, you were able to take those with you? Haberman asked. He kept talking, seeming to have registered my surprise, and said, no, I think that it's in the archives, but most of it is in the archives. But the Kim Jong-un letters, we have incredible things. In fact, Trump did not return the letters, which were included in boxes he had brought to Mar-a-Lago, to the National Archives until months later. The Washington Post reported on it in early 2022. The Justice Department began investigating how the classified material made its way in and out of the White House residence. In one of our earlier interviews, I had asked him separately about some of the texts between the FBI agent and the FBI official working on the Robert Mueller investigation, whose affair prompted the agent's removal from the case. We had learned the night before Biden's inauguration that Trump was planning to make the text public. He ultimately didn't, but he told me that Meadows has the material in his possession and offered to connect me with him. So the key here is nothing of great urgency, no, Trump said when directly asked, did you take anything of noteworthy from the White House to your Mar-a-Lago? Well, according to Trump, no. And let's see, this interview, let me just get a timestamp here. These interviews with Trump, she did several of them, and several of them including last year, 2021, and this year. So her interviews with Trump were all the way back to last year. This is before he initially returned 15 boxes to the National Archives in January of this year. This was before, in June, attorneys from the Department of Justice went down to Mar-a-Lago. FBI agents went down to Mar-a-Lago, met with Trump's attorney. Christina Bobb was one of them, who now is saying, oh, I was never actually a lawyer for Donald Trump on the classified documents issue. Seems odd since she put in writing certification. She certified to the Department of Justice and FBI in writing that they had returned everything to the DOJ. But why this is important, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to pretend to play one on the internet, but I do know enough about legal law. If you're charging somebody criminally, particularly a former president, you would think it's enough that you clearly have a paper trail. Okay, he took all these documents, he lied to the FBI and DOJ, or his lawyers lied, which they're representing him, that it seems there was obstruction, meaning his lawyers depicted it that all of these documents were in one central location. When they got there in the August 8th raid, there was documents in Trump's office. There was documents in Trump's bedroom. There was documents in a kind of a vestibule area right outside Trump's bedroom that there was a lot of foot traffic. So either they lied or documents were moved. There goes the obstruction. But with all that, you also need, you kind of have to establish whether he knowingly lied, meaning whether there was intention behind it, whether he knew, whether he was knowingly trying to conceal things. Well, you're obviously Maggie Haberman, who's not my cup of tea journalistically, but put that aside. She's not a criminal lawyer, so Trump's not lying to a lawyer or the FBI. He's lying to a journalist. But on top of everything else that we already know, this could be used if and when they prosecute him to establish his thought pattern. The fact that as far back in 2021, he was lying that, no, nothing of note. I didn't bring nothing of note, aside from hundreds of classified documents, including, by all reports, documents pertaining to nuclear programs, either of allied countries or enemy countries, we don't know. Documents on human sources, i.e. spies. Some of the most highly sensitive documents that even people in cabinet level officials, not all cabinet level officials, would have clearance to look at these documents. Documents that are not allowed to be are only allowed to be looked at in special secure rooms. So when he says to Maggie Haberman, no, nothing of note, didn't take anything of note, clearly he's lying. He also said, and this is important because the National Archives is involved in this, Colin, if you could put it back up. He also said, let me find it again. Nothing of great urgency, no, before mentioning the letters that Kim Jong-un had sent him, which he had showed off to so many Oval Office visitors that advisors were concerned he was being careless with sensitive material. You were able to take those with you Haberman asked, he kept talking, seeming to have registered my surprise, and said, no, I think that's in the archives, but most of it is in the archives. So again, he's lying about what the archives have, what he has. At this time, while he was giving an interview to Maggie Haberman, the National Archives was desperately trying to get back everything. They probably didn't know how many classified documents he had taken with him, but he's lying. Oh, no, the Kim Jong-un letters, that's with the archives. No, they found those letters mixed in with a boatload of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. So, to me, this just goes on top of everything else. The false certification that Trump's attorneys gave to the FBI and DOJ, which is lying to the FBI and DOJ, yeah, we've given everything back to you. The fact that they returned 15 boxes in January, again, giving off the impression that was everything. We've given you everything. The fact that when the DOJ and FBI came in June, that they claimed, Trump's lawyers, oh, everything is in one central location, this storage area. The DOJ lawyers, FBI agents said, can we look through the boxes? No, you cannot. But we're showing you this is where everything is. They lied about that too, because there were documents, including in his desk, they found documents in his bedroom. So all of these lies, and now you have, from a year prior, a journalist asking, hey, do you take anything of note with you to Mar-a-Lago? No. So for the people who say, nothing's going to happen to Trump, this is America, listen, I have never been one of these, the walls are closing in kind of people, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you get out of such a mountain of evidence. Secondly, when you look at what happened last week, and by the way, smash that like button. We got almost 200 people watching, but only 100 have pressed the like button. So share this live stream, press that like button. It makes a big difference in getting this to more people. When you add on top of this, last week, the 11th Circuit Court basically overruled this hack Trump-appointed judge who said, who appointed the special master and said that the DOJ cannot use these 100 classified documents until the special master goes through them to confirm they're classified. Yeah, the 11th Circuit threw that out. And then the Trump judge, Cannon, basically folded and said, okay, the DOJ can use those 100 classified documents. So now the special master is basically just going through other stuff, but the classified documents the DOJ now has access to for their criminal investigation. So I really think at this point, I'd be shocked if he's not prosecuted. I really would. I don't see how the DOJ or the FBI at this point, with the amount that they have publicly disclosed, the timeline, how much he took. Obviously, the DOJ and FBI were leaking to the Washington Post and New York Times the nature of documents they took. That's how the Washington Post and New York Times had them. I don't know how at the end of all that, you could say, this was just an exercise of transparency. We're not actually going to prosecute. I don't think so. So that's the classified documents part. The fact that on top of his lawyers lying to the FBI, DOJ, last year, Trump lied to Maggie Haberman, which is not a shock, but it goes to motive. I want to shift over now to the January 6th investigation. I haven't covered it extensively because there's a gazillion and one people covering this extensively. But I do think an interview last night with an investigator who was an investigator on the January 6th committee, there was a lot of explosive revelations in this interview. This was Denver Riggleman. He used to be a Republican congressman. He was on the January 6th committee as an investigator. He was pretty active in kind of mapping out phone calls between Trump White House, different groups like the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers. He was very focused on the data. And there's a lot of particularly, I would say, shall we say, conspiratorial, not in a conspiracy theory kind of way, but Trump's White House conspiring with like white supremacist, violent conspiracy groups that I didn't know about. So I want to play a couple parts from this 60 Minutes interview, and we'll address them each, one by one. If we could start with the first clip, this was last night on 60. So when you hear that, it sounds pretty explosive. I don't know, there's no way of knowing. Well, maybe there is, but we don't know yet. We don't know yet who called this rioter. CNN has an article revealing who the rioter was. I sent this to you, Colin. The mysterious 9-second call from the White House to January 6th rioter. At 4:34 on January 6, 2021, a cell phone registered to a Capitol rioter who had stormed the building received a phone call from the White House landline, according to records obtained by CNN. The call lasted for only 9 seconds. Who placed the call and why remains a mystery, but it is notable as the only known call made from the White House to the phone of a rioter during this critical period. According to the records, the call came from 202-456-1414, the publicly available number for the White House. Like many businesses, outgoing calls from the White House do not show a specific extension. The call was placed in the late afternoon, shortly after President Trump posted a video message on social media telling the rioters at the Capitol, "Go home, we love you, you're very special, blah, blah, blah." It's unclear what, if any, connection exists between the White House and the rioter, including whether the call was made by mistake or whether the call went to voicemail. The call was first disclosed by Denver Riggleman in an interview with 60 Minutes. Riggleman is a former Republican congressman. CNN first learned about the call earlier this year and is revealing the rioter's identity for the first time. The cell phone belonged to a 26-year-old Trump supporter from Brooklyn, New York, named Anton Lunyuk, who traveled to D.C. the night before January 6th with two friends, Francis Connor and Antonio Farino, according to multiple sources. The three men attended the Stop the Steal rally on the Ellipse and then, along with hundreds of others, entered and illegally demonstrated inside the Capitol, a charge they pled guilty to in April and were sentenced earlier this month. Attorneys for all three men declined to comment. According to multiple sources, Lunyuk said he doesn't remember receiving the 9-second call and claims he doesn't know anyone who worked in the Trump White House. The phone call was not mentioned in Lunyuk's sentencing or any court documents. A spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney Office in Washington, D.C. declined to comment. So is the call significant? Tim Mulvey, the January 6th committee spokesperson, told CNN in his role on the select committee staff, Mr. Riggleman had limited knowledge of the committee's investigation, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, the committee was not so happy that this former investigator went on 60 Minutes and spilled the beans. He also wrote a book, so that's why he was on 60 Minutes. Based on watching his interview, I don't think he had limited knowledge. I think he had a lot of knowledge. Here's the thing. I find it pretty hard to believe, like the White House switchboard just butt-dialed some rioter. Obviously, somebody at the White House would have to have this guy's number. It's a 9-second call, so I don't particularly know what coordination could happen in 9 seconds. So we don't really know a lot. We don't get a lot from just knowing that somebody at the White House called this guy. Again, we don't, to be fair, we don't have any evidence that this guy did anything untoward. And the fact that during his prosecution, this call was not mentioned or part of charges against him, I'm assuming they don't have any direct evidence that anybody at the White House was coordinating with this guy. We also don't know anything about, was this guy a member of Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, this and that. But the fact of the matter is, somebody at the White House had this guy's number. Somebody at the White House was communicating with this person or had some kind of connection with this person, unless you want to believe it was just an accidental butt dial that just happened to butt dial somebody storming the Capitol. So that is important. We could find out more on Wednesday when they have the final hearing, or at least the final hearing before the midterms of the January 6th committee. All right, let's continue. There's some other important revelations from this interview. Colin, could you come on here for a second? I want to ask you something. Can you imagine for a second if Obama was president, and I'm not a fan of Obama. People know that. Can you imagine for a second if Obama's White House or the Obama switchboard had contacted, I don't know, members of the Black Panther Party? Name your group, Antifa, scary Antifa. Let's stick with the Black Panther Party. And then the night before, I don't know, inauguration or Obama was contesting something, that the Black Panther members that Obama's White House was calling were in a garage with members of other supposedly extremist, abolitionist groups, plotting to stop something, let's say an election. What do you think the reaction would be on Fox News, the right wing?
Honestly, you could have just stopped at the beginning of if someone found out without even an event happening that just a phone call was made from the White House to the Black Panther Party, and I could already see like weeks of Fox News coverage about the White House colluding with an external organization and stuff like that. And that's without an event actually happening, such as an attempted coup or anything like that. So,
I mean, we remember in 2008, I mean, they had a meltdown that Obama, I guess his pastor, Jeremiah Wright, said some quote unquote extreme things, even though I don't think they were extreme. I think he was right. And, total meltdown. Here you have the Trump's White House contacting this Bianca woman. I don't know if she herself was a Proud Boy, but she certainly had ties to these groups. No problem. And they met in a garage the night before January 6th. It's just crazy, the double standard.
especially like, why choose a garage as your location? You can talk at a cafe. Like they're trying to, like they're like we want to meet in the shadiest location possible too. I find that
Right.
funny.
It's crazy. But what I don't think Trump is going to be criminally prosecuted over January 6th. I think he's going to be criminally prosecuted over the classified documents. January 6th, unless they have some smoking gun that Trump himself was directly involved, or unless Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, flips on Trump, which, as we're going to show you, could possibly happen. I don't know the straight line to prosecute Trump, but there is clear, overwhelming evidence, including that garage footage, that the Trump White House before January 6th was directly coordinating with white supremacist groups, violent conspiracy groups, militia-type groups to overturn the election, and specifically to plot January 6th. I don't know how that doesn't get tied to the president if his administration is constantly calling this woman who's meeting in a fucking garage the night before, like Deep Throat style, with Proud Boys, 3%ers. Yeah, this is cult-like behavior. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's play a little bit more. And remember, smash that like button. We got 250 people watching. We need more of you. Press that like button. There's a lot there. There's a lot. By the way, to leftists and who like putting Marjorie Taylor Greene in headlines, Marjorie Taylor Greene out-lefted AOC or the squad. She is a fascist. Right there, she's calling for martial law. We don't want to prop up Christian nationalist fascists like Marjorie Taylor Greene, calling for martial law over this bullshit Trump insanity. Anyway, there's a couple things there. First of all, the Don Jr. text message, the Don Jr. text message, pretty soon after the election, basically laying the roadmap, putting out the blueprint for how we could basically steal this thing, specifically January 6th, talking about that's when the Electoral College is certified. I mean, if they were going to go after Trump, his son directly pushing Meadows and others to orchestrate this, fake electors and all this bullshit, that would be, you would think, potential links to Trump himself being directly involved and calling the shots and orchestrating this. But bigger picture, if someone's going down criminally for January 6th, then I think there will be people that go down beyond just, the folks who stormed the Capitol who have already been prosecuted. If anyone in Trump's administration is going down, it's probably going to be Mark Meadows. I mean, he's caught up in all of these text messages. The January 6th committee now is going to be speaking with QAnon member Ginny Thomas. Yes, she's finally agreed to talk to the committee, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. So, either Mark Meadows has permanently drank the Trump Kool-Aid and is willing to go down and face prison time for his fearless leader, or he'll flip on Trump. I don't know. I mean, he was a member of the Freedom Caucus. He seems to be a religious guy from his text messages. He seemed to be very loyal to Trump, but that's very different when you're facing potential prison time for your role, because Mark Meadows seemed to be the quarterback, receiving all the messages from various people and quarterbacking this whole thing to try and overturn the election results and keep Trump in power. If it were me and the DOJ came to me and said, you're facing, I'm just making this up, but 20 years, or tell us Trump's role, I would turn on Donald Trump in a New York minute. So we'll see. But it's not looking good for Mark Meadows. It is not looking good for Mark Meadows. And then specifically on Mark Meadows, there's more. There's more pertaining to Mark Meadows. This is, let me see where I put it. Yeah, this is the last article in the Live Doc column. Headline, Meadows texts reveal direct White House communications with pro-Trump operative behind plans to seize voting machines. I told you there's a lot. There's a lot of new developments. As allies of then-President Donald Trump made a final push to overturn the election in late December 2020, one of the key operatives behind the effort briefed then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows about his attempts to gain access to voting systems in key battleground states, starting with Arizona and Georgia, according to text messages obtained by CNN. Phil Waldron, an early proponent of various election-related conspiracy theories, texted Meadows on December 23rd that an Arizona judge had dismissed a lawsuit filed by friendly GOP lawmakers there. The suit demanded state election officials hand over voting machines and other election equipment as part of the hunt for evidence to support Trump's baseless claims of voter fraud. In relaying the news to Meadows, Waldron said the decision would allow opponents to engage in, quote, delay tactics, preventing Waldron and his associates from immediately accessing machines. Waldron also characterized Arizona as, quote, our lead domino we were counting on to start the cascade, referring to similar efforts in other states like Georgia. Pathetic, Meadows responded. The messages, which have not been previously reported, shed new light on how Waldron's reach extended into the highest levels of the White House and the extent to which Meadows was kept abreast of plans for accessing voting machines, a topic sources tell CNN, and court documents suggest is of particular interest to state and federal prosecutors probing efforts. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of, I think Meadows has real criminal liability here. He is all over the place with these text messages. He is communicating with Don Jr. about a fake electors scheme, with Marjorie Taylor Greene about martial law, with Ginny Thomas, by the way, who clearly was communicating with her husband, Clarence Thomas, who should be impeached from the Supreme Court for a lot of reasons. He should have never been appointed to the Supreme Court, but I digress. Mark Meadows has some serious shit here, and question will ultimately be, is he going to sing like a bird on Donald Trump? Because, come on, you really think Donald Trump wasn't directly involved with all this, that Mark Meadows was just freelancing here, that all these people were just freelancing? Of course not. Question is, where's the paper trail? Donald Trump does not email. Donald Trump does not text message. Donald Trump apparently didn't talk that much on the phone either during this time. So we'll see. I want to play the last clip we have from that 60 Minutes interview, Colin. The Democratic Party, besides being corrupt, is also spineless. But if the Democratic Party had any spine, they would have initiated impeachment proceedings into Clarence Thomas ages ago. Because let me tell you something. If, I don't know, Sonia Sotomayor's spouse, Elena Kagan's spouse, Ketanji Brown spouse, Jackson Brown, if any of them had direct communications with, I don't know, Obama's chief of staff about overturning election results in states, you better believe the right wing would be storming the Supreme Court in 10 seconds. And until there were impeachment proceedings and possibly inquiring into prosecution against complicit liberal Supreme Court justices. Democratic Party, nothing. I'm sure Clarence Thomas didn't know his wife was like a QAnon cultist working to flip the results in Arizona and Wisconsin and was texting Mark Meadows Bible verses. Yeah, the Proud Boys would be cracking skulls. So there is a lot that was revealed in that 60 Minutes interview. And you want to know something? You know, I try to thread an important line because we're not like a Trump channel here. I haven't covered Trump 24/7 like the rest of the corporate media. And frankly, some independent media have covered Trump 24/7 for 5 years. We haven't done that. But I think we need to do multiple things at once. Obviously, we're continuing to covering the union movement in this country. I just interviewed actually a retired railroad worker earlier this morning, so we'll be airing that either today or tomorrow. Covering the workers on strike. There might be a railroad strike coming up. If there is, we'll certainly be out there covering it on the ground, as always. Continuing to cover water and lead problems. We just did a live stream last week about lead all over the place in Chicago, massive lead levels in water that the mainstream media isn't covering. So we're continuing to cover the important stories that no one else is covering, frankly. But I don't really know, if you're a leftist, how you don't cover direct links here between the former president, who very well could become the next president if he runs again and isn't prosecuted. I mean, you have direct ties here between the Trump White House and like white supremacist groups. You have direct ties here between the Trump White House and violent conspiracy movements, who, by the way, Trump himself is like literally playing footsie with now. Trump has been putting out memes in recent weeks that the storm is coming right out of QAnon. We don't know, but we saw Trump's supporters at his Ohio rally holding up their finger. Like, there have been reports that that's somehow linked to QAnon. I don't know how you would ignore this. We shouldn't ignore this. You could cover the Democratic Party being corrupt. They certainly are. I have been covering Biden has abandoned the very few promises he made. $15 minimum wage, gone. Public option, gone. Police reform turned into, let's give $32 billion more to the police. But you got to walk and chew gum. These leftists, air quotes, who are just ignoring the growing white supremacy movement that is basically hand in hand with the Republican Party, that is ignoring this violent conspiracy movement called QAnon, that is ignoring, Supreme Court justice wives seemingly involved with all this. Well, if you want to look through history at cases where things like this were ignored and what happened, look no further than the 1930s and 40s in Germany. I want to also address, because there's also more inquiries that are directly related to Trump. If we could show this tweet from Kyle Cheney, Colin. News, the January 6th Select Committee subpoenaed Wisconsin House Speaker Robin Vos over the weekend and is seeking his testimony by today, meaning today, about a July phone call he had with Donald Trump. And if we could click on the link in that tweet from the subpoena, I don't know if you could zoom in on it so people could read. I want to go to the bottom of that. The Select Committee's investigation has revealed you have information relevant to its inquiry. Specifically, it has been publicly reported in July 2022, you received a telephone call from former President Trump, which Mr. Trump asked you to take measures to change the result of the 2020 presidential election in Wisconsin. The call was apparently in response to a ruling of the Wisconsin Supreme Court in early July, barring the use of drop-off boxes outside election offices for absentee ballots in future elections. After you reportedly told Mr. Trump that what he was requested is not allowed under the Wisconsin Constitution, Mr. Trump posted derogatory statements about you on Truth Social and endorsed your challenger in the 2022 Republican primary. The circumstances and details regarding your interactions with former President Trump related to the 2020 election are relevant to the Select Committee's investigation and proposed recommendations. And those recommendations, by the way, might include a criminal referral to the Justice Department about Trump specifically. So the fact that Trump was calling this guy, what is that, 18 months after he left the White House? Hey, could you change? We need to change the results in Wisconsin. That's a direct one-on-one with Trump. So again, the January 6th committee, you can call it what you want. Right-wingers say it's politicized. From what I've seen, they've done a good, solid investigation. They're clearly trying to find direct ties here to Trump, and that's one of them. And this tweet from Andrew Weissman reflects that. This is the connective tissue between the January 6th committee is looking for tying the White House to the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. So he's talking about, oh, no, this is something else that I wanted to get into. All right, so the last thing, and I said at the beginning of this live stream, there's a lot. The last thing, let me find the article. This is from The Guardian, and it's at the bottom here. All right. They're talking about the book of Denver Riggleman, who was the January 6th investigator, who was interviewed by 60 Minutes. Colin, it's the article. Yeah, you have the article. If you could go down to the part that starts with Stone was one of more than 20 high priority targets, but the panel faced an uphill battle. There you go. Stone was one of more than 20 high-priority targets, but the panel faced an uphill battle identifying his contacts after he refused to voluntarily allow the Select Committee to obtain his call detail records, forcing investigators to work backwards through associates, the book says. The Select Committee was able to construct a detailed map of Stone's contacts after obtaining the call detail records of Kristen Davis, who's also known as the Manhattan Madam, who was with Stone at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. on the day before and the day after the January 6th attacks. And after the investigation identified Stone's number, the book says they compiled an intriguing map. Stone called Tarrio, Enrique Tarrio, head of the Proud Boys, both before and after January 6th. And he called the former Oath Keepers chief, Stuart Rhodes, 9 days after the riot. Both have since been charged with seditious conspiracy. The number for Stone also connected to a number of prominent Republicans who each played a different role in Trump's effort to overturn the 2020 election results, including the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and Arthur Schwartz, an aide to Donald Trump, Trump's eldest son. So this, from the tweet from Andrew Weissman I was showing, this is the connective tissue January 6th committee is looking for tying the White House to the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. Because Roger Stone basically is an intermediary for Donald Trump. He has been throughout the Trump years. Trump's campaign, Roger Stone basically infamously in interviews has said, this is, other than Richard Nixon, this is the closest thing to Richard Nixon. he called Donald Trump. And he did a lot of dirty work for Donald Trump. So Roger Stone calling the Proud Boys, calling the Oath Keepers, makes sense. They're trying to link Trump's White House with these white supremacy groups and white militia groups. So, you know, I haven't treated like the January 6th committee hearings as like the Super Bowl must-see TV that MSNBC and CNN has. However, I do think this hearing on Wednesday is going to be pretty important because it's the final hearing before the midterms, and by all accounts, they're going to be revealing a lot of information that directly ties the Trump White House to Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and we'll see if they have evidence that directly ties Trump to any of these groups. So, to answer the question in the beginning of this live stream, Jordan, do you honestly think we're headed towards a civil war? I think we are potentially headed for a serious increase in political violence. I don't want that, obviously, but I do believe we could be headed towards an increase in political violence because I do think we don't really have, like, you know, nobody's above the law. Plenty of people are above the law in this country. We live in the United Corporations of America. However, I do believe Trump's going to be prosecuted. And if you haven't noticed, what is basically now formed around Trump is more of a cult than a political party or a political movement. It's literally, I think Donald Trump could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. I don't think Fox News would care. I don't think his supporters would care. They'd say he or her had it coming to him. And Trump was simply defending himself. It very much has the markings of a cult. The rationalizations and the loyalty of Trump's base, which is kind of shocking because it's recently come out, confirmed, that he pretty much lied about everything. He was clearly not a billionaire based on inflating his assets, tax dodging, insurance fraud. He was not a self-made man. He was not a successful businessman, yet he's hoodwinked millions and millions of people. How many votes did he get? I think he got 70 million votes. He's hoodwinked millions of people, and they're not all bad people. A lot of them are good people that just have been sucked in by this fairy dust. But I think he's going to be prosecuted specifically over the classified documents, and I think you're going to see an increase in political violence. I don't want to go as far as a civil war. I think that's a little dramatic, but we are seeing. This is the calm before the storm, I would say. You are seeing increased threats of violence online. You are seeing at these Trump rallies, it's almost like watching a cult gathering. You are seeing just more unhinged stuff on Fox News, not just around Trump, but other things. Defending people calling in bomb threats to the Boston Children's Hospital. Saying we need to go after and fight back against indoctrinating our children and, gender affirming care. They're neutering our children. They're maiming their breast. I mean, very hot, politically charged language with direct calls to violence. Tucker Carlson has been doing it, and a lot of people on Fox News have been doing it, YouTube hosts. So unfortunately, I don't know about a civil war, but I do think we're going to see significantly more political violence, which I don't think any of us should want. Anyway, that's what I got for today. Don't get it twisted. We're not dropping everything else to cover Trump 24/7, but there's a lot of smoke here. Classified documents case, the January 6th case that I think is important to cover. I don't understand leftists who believe if you cover Donald Trump, you're like a Dem or you're MSN. I mean, I think it's an important news story when the former president at his White House seemingly were directly coordinating with white supremacist groups, with violent conspiracy groups to overturn an election. No, it wasn't just a protest that got out of hand or the minimization that has happened by leftists like Glenn Greenwald and others. This was a violent attempt to overthrow election results. regardless of what you think about Joe Biden. I'm not a fan. I don't want him to win a second term, but he won the election. It is what it is. He won the election. As leftists, progressives, just people, you should not be okay with attempts to overthrow an election. How could we slam the United States government for their decades-long directly involved with coups of democratically elected governments across the globe? Iran, Nicaragua, I could go on. But we're going to ignore internal efforts to overthrow election results here or minimize it as just, it's just a protest that got out of hand. No, sorry. So that's all I got. Thank you for watching. I won't be live at 5 o'clock, but we will have other videos throughout the day. Please, please, if you can, support our reporting, statuscoup.com/join. We want to do more on-the-ground reporting this fall. If there is a railroad strike, we will be out on the ground covering it. So please, please, please support us, statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 a month. It makes a big, big difference, and we'll see you back here later.